Ernest and Steven, it's a pleasure for us to meet you both.
Absolutely.
First question would be directed to Steven. Would you say that the book found you, or you found the book at this stage of your career?
Well, it's easy to answer that question. The book found me. I didn't find the book. I hadn't really heard of Ready Player One until Warner Brothers introduced me to it. I was blithely minding my own business, planning another Indiana Jones movie, and when the Warner guys came over to my office and presented me with Ernie's book.
And did it capture you the moment you read it?
Yeah, it captured me on, I don't even know what page number it was, but what was the number of pages where Parsifal and Artemis speak for the first time, have that long 5-page conversation?
Oh yeah, that's right in the middle. Yeah, that's right in the middle of the book, the beginning of level 2, where they have that chat log of just back and forth text transcript of them talking.
Yeah, I saw the movie and the characters at that point. I saw a huge movie with the plot of this tremendously ambitious competition to gain complete control of the Oasis after James Halliday's death and the contest that he initiates. And I saw that. That's great movie value. That had, the whole movie, the book had movie value all the way through it. But it wasn't until that conversation I said, okay, this is going to be driven by these characters more than anything else.
But wasn't it eerie to read about yourself all the time? Because I imagine it would be very too close for comfort for yourself to say, I have to do this.
I only mentioned him twice by name, but
in my mind it was a whole thing.
Well, it was certainly right in the middle of one of the most fabulous decades of my life, because the 1980s isn't just about movies. For me, it's when I met my wife. It's when I had my first child. It's when Amblin Entertainment was born. It was the birth of E.T. the Extraterrestrial. It was one of the most important decades of my entire life, and here Ernie is capturing every aspect of it, not just the aspect through the mirror of my own experience, but the aspect of the mirror through the entire culture, music, film, TV style of the 1980s, and also 70s and 90s, because you overlap. It kind of dips its toe into the late 70s and goes into the 90s.
Ernest, hearing that, I mean, that must be a dream come true for you, writing that book and knowing that Steven Spielberg is just mesmerized with. I mean, how does it feel to travel the world at the moment, talking about your book, sitting next to Steven Spielberg, an idol for all of us?
It's very surreal, but wonderful. You know, I feel like it's happened gradually over a period of years. You know, he signed on almost 3 years ago this month, exactly. So, but I've had enough time to try to wrap my head around it, but I still haven't. It's just been a wonderful experience, and even right up until now, it's still just the best ride I've ever been on.
Oh.
As a screenwriter myself, I must ask, how hard was it for you to adapt your own novel into a screenplay? How many darlings have you killed, and was it hard to say no to Steven Spielberg?
No, it was not. The thing is, the whole time I was writing the book, I assumed it could never be a movie. You know, that was actually freeing to me in my imagination. Once I conceived the idea of celebrating all of pop culture and mashing all of it up together in this virtual world, I knew that the licensing of that would be probably cost prohibitive. So I just assumed that it would never be a movie. And then when Warner Brothers bought the movie rights, I'm like, well, there's a chance it might be a movie now. And the example that I would always use of what I hoped would happen is something like Who Framed Roger Rabbit. Because that's a movie in which you have Bugs Bunny and Mickey Mouse together in one scene, and he's the gentleman who made that happen. So I think they went and said, we want to make a celebration to the whole history of animation and use your IP to do that, and everyone was enthusiastic about having their creations celebrated in a Steven Spielberg movie, and I think that same thing played out again with Ready Player One. So I was very fortunate.
Everybody volunteered their IPs. There were very few who we approached who said turned us down. As a matter of fact, the only real no was the makers, not the makers, but the IP holders of Blade Runner, which figures prominently in Ernie's book, and our first attempt to have the characters through FlickSync merge with an actual film was to recreate that Ridley Scott movie. By the way, Ridley's a friend of mine, would have easily and happily given me the rights, but he didn't control the rights.
So you took another movie. We have to talk about this. Can we talk?
Do we have to talk about?
Well, we can.
You keep it a secret till after the movie comes out.
Can we talk about the movie without mentioning the movie? Because we were sitting in the screening and we were thinking, this isn't happening. This is not happening. And is it because you were friends with the director? Of course.
I think that helps.
And that helps. And how on earth did you do it? I mean, visually, it's so stunning.
Well, let me just say one thing without mentioning what the movie is. And that very simply is, and this is a very small thing, but I think your audience who loves Easter eggs and loves the minutia of technicality might get off on this, okay? We did not want to lose the impact of the level of grain in the 35mm release prints of that movie. So we actually not only captured the sets and the moments, the iconic moments from that famous film, but we went right down to the granular level of making every single digital shot with digital avatars. Our cast now in their avatar characters, even they were grained over. So the grain on the characters matches the grain of the movie that we all love.
Can we ask a very nerdy question, because we've been discussing it without mentioning the movie?
No,
No, you go ahead.
You go.
I don't know. I'm not sure if you mean the right question, but let's say it. I don't know.
The blood.
The blood.
Yes.
Yeah. Did you recreate the blood, or was it taken?
Was it from?
No, it was recreated.
It's recreated.
Yes, recreated.
No.
You know how the original director? How long it take?
I know, but they didn't have the digital tools that we had at our
Okay. Oh, this is fantastic.
Yeah.
This is absolutely fantastic.
I have to tell you guys that watching Steven and Janusz execute. Excuse me. Sorry. Bleep me out. I've had to mention it, and everybody always asks about this in every interview. So, but for me, that was one of my favorite parts of working on this movie, because prior to that, it was kind of me celebrating my heroes, and that was when I got to see Steven and Janusz doing the same thing and celebrating someone they really admired and having so much fun doing it. I remember when we were working on putting that together, I went back and got my Blu-ray of the movie out and went and watched the making of documentary, and there's Steven and Janusz in the documentary talking about how much they admire the film and how much they love it, and that was years before. So you can see. I
haven't read your book.
Yeah, so you can see already they were such huge fanboys, and so that was so much fun for me to get to see my heroes celebrate their heroes.
So it wasn't all digital; it was also sets.
It was also set.
They recreated that hotel room.
The hotel room.
Yeah. This makes it
Elevator.
This makes it
even better.
They were sets. And without mentioning names, but the widow and brother-in-law of the filmmaker were on the set that day we shot.
Oh, dear.
Oh.
What were they doing?
And I have videos of them, because I took my camera while we were shooting the scene. I only photographed them watching the scene being recreated, and she had her hands up to her face like this. And she thought
That's going to be on the DVD.
It was like a flashback. It was like, for both of them, it was like going back in time.
And has there been another movie which was possible to recreate?
I said it was Blade Runner. Blade Runner is Ernie's book.
Yeah.
And that's where they journey into Decker's world through a term that Ernie coined, invented, called flick sync.
Yeah, but I remember it was War Games also.
Oh, well, I had three different movies, and War Games is in the midst of being remade, and I think we wanted something that was more visually and cinematic and would draw you in. And I wanted to change up the challenges. Like everybody seems to be worried that I'd be worried that the challenges are different, but I think that just adds to the experience, especially for fans of the book, if they get to go into the movie and they're expecting one thing to happen, but then something in the same spirit of what happens in the book, but completely different. So it's surprising even for fans of the book, which I think is a good thing.
It also slows down in the middle. It's the pace is going like in the original movie, and that's very risky, isn't it? In the middle of a movie.
Yeah, but also the tone.
The tone, and the pacing.
But the thing of it is, in the Oasis, you can be anybody and you can do anything, and the tone is going to shift with the worlds that you immerse yourself in. This movie is about allowing the audience to also go through the experience of total immersion. And for a long time I thought, well, maybe we should wait a few years until until virtual reality or augmented reality is really with us, so we can really immerse the audience. But I thought, wait a second, isn't the power of movies and the power of cinema the ability, without any tricks or technology, to just create an experience that the audience will feel is virtual to them, that they will find themselves inside the story, inside the movie. I know when I see a movie that completely overwhelms me, like when I saw Black Panther, I was inside that movie. I wasn't outside looking in. I was inside, not wanting to look out.
That brings me to a question, because I did an interview with the CEO of a big virtual reality company. He said VR and movies are two sides of the same coin. They basically sort of help each other, but they will never be sort of moved together, in a sense that virtual reality will be part of movie history, in the sense that people are trying to make it. What would you say about it? Do you think it will enhance the way that we will watch movies in the future? Will it make movie watching change or different? Or
it'll be different. It can't be the same, because you can't use the conventional narrative form in virtual reality. For one thing, there's too much for the audience to fasten their attention onto, and too much of a challenge for filmmakers to say, hey, the story's over here, why are you looking over there? What are you looking over there for? I know it's a beautiful tree, but the actors and the plot is in this direction, why are you looking in that direction? When you give the audience free range to look anywhere, you've lost control. Augmented reality is more what I think we'll be able to merge with film, with cinema. But that's different than virtual reality. Also, you don't want to go to a movie theater and have a social experience, which is the whole point of going to the movies, by putting on headgear that makes you forget the pretty girl that you have invited on a first date to see the movie with you. You suddenly put this on, and selfishly you're so self-involved in the story and you forget your date. That's what virtual reality will do. That's why virtual reality as a technical medium is never going to be conducive to narrative storytelling or dating.
Good. I think that's the point.
Wouldn't be a possibility to restrict the chances or the possibilities you give the audience, that you say, hey, we have 3 stories here, choose from one?
Yeah, well, then that's more like a narrative branching of storylines, like in a video game, which is again 2 different mediums. One's interactive and one's passive. And when you add virtual reality and the opportunity to look around right there, that makes it interactive, and it also robs the filmmaker of composing the shot and doing edits in the way that you can, for the whole history of cinema, that's how we've been doing it, is through this window. And virtual reality opens it up to 360 degrees, but it like he said, presents completely different narrative challenges, and I think that would end up being a whole different medium, maybe born of cinema, but separate and different.
Absolutely. I also really believe that when we go into a virtual world, the oasis in Ready Player One is, I think, the kinds of worlds creators of worlds would rather do. It'll be like the original AOL chat rooms, right?
Yeah. Right.
Except you will go into a world of your choosing or of someone else's design that you decide to enter into, and you will meet avatars and you'll make eye contact. You won't be looking down at your device all the time, getting rheumatism in your neck 30 years from now, but instead you'll be exercising, you'll be on a treadmill, you'll be really healthy, you'll be making eye contact with other avatars, and you'll be in the chat room of the future. And I think virtual reality is more conducive to Ernie's vision of virtual reality based on what he created with Ready Player One, the book.
It's more dystopian in his book, I think, and it's a movie about control, not only about technical control, but it's also about big corporations controlling the media. And do you think this is desirable? Something like the Oasis, or are we already there yet? Are we already in the middle of fighting these corporations?
Well, for me, when I was writing Ready Player One, the Oasis was always in my mind an allegory for the internet and the way that we currently use the internet. I mean, now when you go on the internet, you view it again through a 2-dimensional window, but you very much are escaping into another world, and it's a world where you can seek out and find whatever you're interested in, whatever your passions are. There is a website or an online community that you can join and be a part of that. But that's what fascinates me about the internet, and then how it could evolve into the Oasis is this, even though it's the most powerful communication tool that our civilization has ever created good, and it connects all of us and allows us to communicate and collaborate. But we also use it as a tool to not communicate with each other. You know, like he was saying, you see people on a train or in a doctor's office, and they will escape into this virtual world in the handheld computer that they have as a way to avoid communicating with the people around them. So that's what I'm fascinated. You know, I think the best science fiction looks at technology and then extrapolates how it will evolve in the future, and most importantly, how it will affect human relationships and interaction.
As an online video player, gamer, myself, I can totally see what the Oasis does, but do you think it really needs 25 years from now to get there? I think it's,
well, that's the tricky thing about predicting the future. You always are wrong about how fast things happen. But the strange thing about Ready Player One is, you know, I know because the people who have made virtual reality kind of come about have told me that that my book played a role in inspiring them to do it. And the folks at Oculus Rift and HTC Vive and Google have all had me come and do book signings for their employees, because they give out a copy of the book to their new employees to help inspire them. You know, but that's I think that's on a small scale compared to what will happen when this movie is released. Films, especially films by people like Steven, have a huge impact, and people all around the world see them and take inspiration from them. And so in some ways I think that virtual reality as depicted in Ready Player One will become a self-fulfilling prophecy, because so many people will see this movie and see the potential of virtual reality, but also see the pitfalls of it. And like any technology, it's like cinema. You know, there are people who lose themselves completely in movies and detach from the real world. I've been in danger of doing that myself sometimes when I first became a cinephile. But I also think, you know, any form of escapism is essential to the human experience. We all need art and music and poetry and escapism in our lives, but you have to strike a balance between the escaping from the real world and attending to the needs of the real world.
And I have another nerdy question, talking about inspiration. There is this urban legend or rumor that you watch every time before you start a new production, 3 movies or a couple of movies. Which are these 3 movies, and what did they give to you for Ready Player One?
I didn't know this on Ready Player One. It has no precedent, so there was nothing I could possibly, go into my sort of mental card catalog and call up and look at for inspiration. There was nothing I could look at. I don't believe I looked at a single reference movie before I made Ready Player One, because the book was such an original, entity. I just couldn't imagine anything rivaling it in the past that would give me inspiration. So instead, I kept reading his book. I kept reading Ernie's book. That was my inspiration.
So you influenced him. How does it feel?
I influenced Ernie, then he influenced me, and it's sort of back and forth.
But you don't write or you don't make a movie, I assume, because you always said that you invented the blockbuster.
I didn't invent the blockbuster.
But you didn't, because you didn't make Jaws because you wanted to do a blockbuster movie.
No, I made Jaws because I wanted to make a hell of a scary movie about a shark.
Yes, and
I didn't invent the blockbuster. I didn't try to invent the blockbuster, and plus the fact, the credit or blame George Lucas and I are both receiving for Star Wars and Jaws between 1975 and 1977, the release of both. You have to understand that you have to give credit to Victor Fleming and David O. Selznick, who invented Gone with the Wind. Was that the first blockbuster? No. What about the silent movie Intolerance and films by Griffith? They were perhaps the first blockbusters. There have been blockbusters every several years. And you can trace them all the way back through Hollywood history. Ben-Hur was a blockbuster. That was long before Jaws, long before Star Wars. We did not invent the blockbuster. What we invented was a distribution pattern unlike anything that Hollywood had ever done before. We had invented basically opening a movie on more than 20 screens. We opened Jaws, which was considered to be unprecedented, on 409 screens. That was considered to be a huge, wide release.
I would like to ask you something about Jaws, because I read that when Jaws came out, you would drive around in New York and look at the queues in front of the movie theaters to check out the response by the people.
Right.
Nowadays, with social media, there's so much happening out there, and everyone discusses plot points in a movie or discusses a movie in itself. And you just mentioned Indy 5, the next one.
Yes.
Do you pay attention to what people do on the internet and say to your movie and would like you to do?
I'm not on the internet.
Okay.
I don't have a Twitter account. I don't have a Facebook account. I just text. That's it. I'm old-fashioned that way. I don't have a laptop computer. I don't. I just literally. I'm still kind of analog. I can make a digital movie and still stay an analog person. It might be a contradiction in terms, but that's just the way it is.
So do you still drive around and look at the queues?
well, now there's a lot more movie theaters, so it takes a while, yeah.
But is there someone who brings the reaction from the audience to you? So
brings the what?
That you can get some information about the
Of course, it all osmosis in. But you have to understand that the reaction of an audience is after the fact. A reaction of an audience to any of the films I've made is after it's too late to do anything about it. Those reactions just become part of the zeitgeist. That's just part of history. And I'm always focusing on what I'm doing next, not what I've just finished. And so I'm usually focused on the next movie.
Can we talk about the technical side of Ready Player One? Because we already spoke about that one movie in the movie and how it was done. How did you do it? I mean, camera-wise and in creating those two worlds, the real world next to the virtual world. Yes. How did you approach that?
Well, you have to understand one thing, and that is there are many different layers to this cake. This is not a this is not an open-faced sandwich. This is what we used to call in my father's era a Dagwood sandwich, which is many, many, many layers. And those layers are created, first of all, in terms of conceptually from the book to the screenplay. The layers are all created through the structure of scene study in a script. So it's the plot, the structure, the narrative, where everybody winds up, the surprises, letting the audience be ahead of the movie, then letting the movie get out ahead of the audience and surprise the audience, and then once again allowing the audience to predict something that's about to happen and be right, which is always very rewarding for an audience. But then the audience predicts something and they're wrong because we get out ahead of them again. That's all structure. That's done privately, pulling out your hair, pacing, trying to figure out the movie in a pitching session with Ernie and Zach Penn, the screenwriter. That's a whole thing. It doesn't involve the 1,000 people it took to make Ready Player One at two huge companies, Digital Domain and ILM. And that's where all the heavy lifting really occurred. But the fun for me on this movie was something that I don't think it's that easy for an audience to understand, but every single shot in the Oasis I had to do myself with a small controller in my hand with a couple of thumb buttons. Every shot. Because there's no camera, there's no film step in every scene that takes place in over 55% of this movie, which takes place in the Oasis, because that's a whole world that we create. The shots, every single shot, I had to actually do myself. Jim Cameron does the same thing. When he makes Avatar 2 and 3 and 4, Jim sits in a VCam tent, the way I sat in a video camera tent, all alone, with 3 huge monitors where I can see the world that I'm flying through, and we have to achieve our shots. The same way I do with a cameraman on a conventional movie. I say, use this lens, put the camera here, let's move the camera from here to here, let's cross the actors through that door. It's called blocking. But instead of having a whole crew to help me block, I had to do it alone in a tent. And I had to do it while the actors are waiting in a mocap volume for me to come out and do the next page of the next scene. So it was really complicated, and it was really hard to do, but at the end it was so fulfilling. It was really, I felt so personally attached to the physical craft of putting this movie together. And that's not taking any credit away from ILM and Digital Domain, who had to then take those angles and they had to render them so you would believe that this world was photorealistic and really existed. The biggest challenge for this movie, for me, was getting the facial capture and the emotion carried over from the real actors, Olivia and Ty and all of, and TJ Miller and Lena Waithe and Wynn and Philip, who played Show and Dado, and getting those emotions to transfer to the avatars. So after a while, you get emotionally involved with the avatars as much as you're getting emotionally involved when you finally meet the real characters. That was probably the biggest challenge for me.
But doing this yourself with the camera, did this take you back to your beginnings when you did the? Because I saw Duel the other day again in preparation for Ready Player One, and I thought this is all made with with handheld and everything.
I felt I was running around with an 8mm Kodak film camera at 12 years old making my westerns. I mean, it felt that way in that tent. And unfortunately, there's very little footage we call B-roll footage, or the people that make the documentaries and the making of. There's very little footage of me in that tent, and I wish there had been more, just so film students can see this new iteration of technology, this new way of making movies. We just don't have a lot, unfortunately. You were there.
It was a wonder to behold watching him do it. Well, the thing that's amazing about it is because of they working on the motion capture stage, they had everyone in suits with little balls and things on them, and so but when he would capture a shot. At one point, he had me go and put on an Oculus Rift headset. I saw it on an Apple box, and then suddenly all the actors had their costumes on, and the sets that digital sets had been created, and that was all being rendered on the fly. And I could look around and see the whole world that was being created, and it got rendered in more detail later. But it was all being rendered on the fly, and the actors could look on monitors and see themselves how they looked inside the Oasis. But the really amazing thing for me about that was that every time he would capture a shot in the capture volume, it wasn't just captured from one angle the way it normally is. He had everyone's emotions and everyone's reactions and everyone's movements captured from every conceivable angle. So when he went back in to shoot it in the with his digital camera, his camera was freed from the constraints of physics, and he could pass through solid objects or put the camera. It was kind of like Tintin. The two things that got me so excited about Ready Player One was watching what he had done with Tintin, and then also the BFG, and seeing Mark Rylance's emotions come through in The Big Friendly Giant, and knowing, wow, because that was the best I had ever seen it done. I never felt like, wow, the soul of the actor is right there in this digital representation, and that got me so excited. And I feel like it's even more profound in Ready Player One, like the soul of the actor. And that's what's going to be profound about virtual reality. If we ever get to the point where you can capture someone's facial expressions on the fly and render them and have that, then you won't be operating kind of stoic puppets like you do now in virtual reality. All the nuance of human interaction, the reason we're all in the same room together, like that could be duplicated in virtual reality. But that's what's amazing about this movie is that it's.
You notice in the film that when they're suiting up, getting ready, the real characters getting ready to go into the Oasis, they put on emo cams, emotion cams. They put on cams that scan their faces. So and these are readers, and they can read through your arms. They just read your every emotion, and that was just a justification to show how once they become avatars, they are so lifelike and they're so emotional because they're actually reading the reactions of the real characters in the real world.
I guess we're close to the end, huh?
Yeah. Are we? Just one more question.
Would we say the last question is about what keeps you going on? What is? Do you think? Is there a certain responsibility you feel to do another or to tell a lot of more stories?
I don't feel a responsibility at all. I feel like I'm lucky. I feel like I just feel fortunate that my interest has not waned after almost 50 years of filmmaking. That I'm as interested now in telling stories as I was when I was 12 years old with my dad's 8mm movie camera. I swear it hasn't changed a bit. I may be a little bit wobbly on the outside, but I'm still that kid on the inside when I've got a story to tell. And what keeps me going are stories like Ernest's story, Ready Player One. That gives me truly inspiration, throws me back into my own past, and where I can find who I used to be as a filmmaker and bring that back into the contemporary world.
Oh, and we're very happy that you still have that urge to do so.
I still have the urge.
And
thank you very much.
Thank you for all your movies, because otherwise we wouldn't be here.
We wouldn't have met. We wouldn't be talking about
and for all the ones that are coming, because we
Ready Player
question
Two.
the last question B, sort of, Indy 5. Can you say anything
Not
about
yet,
that one?
not yet.
Okay.
We'll be sitting back here in 2 years again, maybe 2.5.
But
Okay,
it won't be
great.
mo-capped.
No, it won't.
Oh, okay.
It'll be all physical.
Okay, great.
And when will be Ready Player 2?
You're writing that now?
Yeah, I'm working on that right now. I've stopped to come and promote Ready Player One, but I'll return to it when I go back home.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you, guys. Thank you. That was great.
Oh, that was so much fun.
That was a fun interview.
Yeah,
that was a great time.
Thank you very much.
This is great. It's like sitting around a coffee table and just talking.
Yeah.
We all got to be. You look just like me anyway.
His surname is Streberg.
Really?
Streberg.
And I wear scarves all the time, like you. I don't have mine on now, but I was focusing on you throughout. Saying, "Am I looking in the mirror?" Something. Why don't we stand here? Let me come in the middle. Sure. With Ernie. Oh,
Ich bin 2025 geboren. Man nennt unsere Generation die verlorenen Millionen. Verloren nicht, weil wir verschwunden wären.
Wir sind fertig für heute. Wir sind durch. Wir sind am Flughafen. Der Tag war wundervoll. Es war eine sensationelle Erfahrung. Es wird unser Leben auf jeden Fall ein Stück weiterbringen. Und
ich bin immer noch in so einer Zeitschleife.
ja, stimmt, ne? Also es ist so ein surrealer Raum. Ja, wir sitzen am Flughafen. Wir sind
Virtual Reality Oasis Raum.
ja. Wir verlassen jetzt die Oasis und gehen zurück nach Hamburg, bedanken uns aber ganz herzlich bei euch für die Aufmerksamkeit und ich hoffe, ihr hattet genauso viel Spaß wie wir oder konntet uns zumindest unseren Spaß ansehen, oder?
Ja. Ja, ich kann nichts mehr sagen. Ich habe mein Pulver verschossen wurde. Emotional ist das bei mir immer noch eine Achterbahn in der Birne. Ich komme gar nicht klar.
Ja, deswegen labern wir jetzt auch nicht lange rum. Es war auf jeden Fall ein tolles Erlebnis. Vielen Dank nochmal an Warner, die das möglich gemacht haben. Speziell hier Kollege André, der neben uns sitzt. Und ansonsten hoffe ich, ihr habt den Film ebenfalls genossen. Und wir sehen uns bald bei Kino Plus. Macht's gut. Tschüss.
Ja.